Welcome back. It's the Big Blue Banter New York Giants football podcast. We're live here on YouTube, and we're going live to talk the Giants' day one draft. The New York Giants have made their selection on day one. No trades. They didn't trade up. They didn't trade back. I know that was the big discussion, Nick, for the last 24, 48, 72 hours. And we'll discuss in this podcast what Joe Schoen, the Giants GM, said about potential trades. There was big talk today about the Giants in the last 24 hours trading up for Drake May. I had been convinced it was going to happen, wrongfully so. The Patriots, shortly after the draft, their GM said it was never really that much of a decision. Once we found out the Giants, the Washington was going Jaden Daniels, we had pretty much made our mind up. But, there was some talk that the Giants had made a big offer, which was this year's round one, next year's round one, and pick 47. That was supposedly the big play they made. Wasn't enough for the Patriots. And I saw a rumor, Nick, that the Vikings offered 3 first-round picks plus the 2026 for 3, and they were denied that as well. So the Patriots clearly had their conviction on Drake May as well. Giants tried to trade up for Caleb Williams. From what I heard in January, they had talks with the Bears. That didn't go anywhere. Obviously, no one's trading Caleb. So the Giants weren't able to trade up for the quarterbacks they had a conviction on. So instead, they took the best player on their board by far. And I think we would agree to start, Nick. If you just looked at it, quarterbacks aside, or even the quarterbacks that were available, would Malik Nabers be the best player available on your board at 6 overall?
Yes, Malik Nabers. I had a higher grade on Malik Nabers than I did Odunze, and some of those tackles you might be able to talk me into it with all off the board. Then it would have definitely been Malik Nabers.
Okay. And I think even for me, at least, if Alt was on the board, I had a considerably higher grade on Nabers. I liked Alt, but I felt like Nabers, there's just nothing really wrong with him from a film standpoint, from a projection standpoint, from an athletic standpoint. There's just not much not to like about this prospect. We're going to get into a bunch of that on this show. We're also going to get into some quotes from Joe Schoen and Brian Dable. We're going to talk about some scouting reports from some interesting people. We're going to talk about our scouting reports. We already did a show on him, which you can find on our page. We did it, about a month ago? It was a film breakdown. We might have been doc for some of the films. So there's just more profile scouting talk on there. And then we're going to get to some, discussions, big picture about the Giants. And of course, anyone joining and listening and tuning in right now, you can put your questions in the super chat. We'll try to answer them throughout the show, but likely we're going to do most of them at the end of the show. For those who are listening on the podcast, we want to provide a show as well, not just Q&A here, though we do want to get to your questions as well. So, Nick, where do you want to start with this whole? You can talk anything, the Nabers pick, the night, anything where the Giants are at holistically or specifically. Where are you starting here?
It's obvious that Joe Schoen and Brian Dable want to get a quarterback. They desperately tried to trade up to get Drake May. And I understand why the New England Patriots had that conviction. You and I both had conviction on Drake May. I think he has such a high ceiling. We've talked so much about that. So let's focus on Malik Nabers. Giants have desperately needed a wide receiver 1 for quite some time, and they have swung and they have missed, and then they swung again and they have missed in the same offseason, actually, with Kadarius Toney and Kenny Golladay. So since they traded Odell Beckham Jr., they've needed a wide receiver 1, and they got one in Malik Nabers. And one of the biggest vulnerabilities, one of the biggest Achilles heel to the New York Giants for the last half decade, you can even say decade, is their inability to create explosive plays. They just traded away Saquon Barkley, who was the catalyst to creating the explosive plays that they actually did create, which wasn't all that often, right? So now you get Malik Nabers in here, and there are a few players in college football who create explosive plays as well and as smoothly as Malik Nabers. So for that, I am very excited. Does that mean the quarterback is going to be targeting him downfield in tight windows? Not necessarily, but Malik Nabers has this ability to catch the football and get north to south immediately. He's one of the more sudden receivers I have ever seen. And you watch him run a curl, you watch him run a comeback, Dan. He secures the football and he's already getting north, and he's an angle breaker with his just acceleration, his explosiveness, and his speed. So I'm looking at the bright side of this, and I know the New York Giants got a true difference maker on offense, and it's something they've desperately needed at a position that does dictate wins in the NFL. Now, is it the position that you and I wanted? Maybe not, but still, this is still a good day for the New York Giants.
Well, I think one thing that's clear for you and I, Nick, is that it's not necessarily the position we wanted, but it is at the same time, right? Because you and I were not really believers, and I know there are some that believe in this. We weren't really believers in just taking a quarterback to take a quarterback. And I'll be honest with you, Nick, I don't want to speak for you, but I don't feel like you had too much of a conviction on JJ McCarthy in the sense that you wanted to trade up for him or take him at 6. I don't necessarily saying you wouldn't want it, you wouldn't be fine with it at 6, but I don't feel like that was like your conviction guy. He certainly wasn't mine. And I could say the same about Penix, Nix, Bo Nix, and who's and no, that's the last one. Am I missing one? No. And those
Michael
three
Penix,
quarterbacks.
Bo
Yeah.
Nix,
And then Bo Nix, right. Is that fair to say?
Yes. I remain cautiously optimistic with JJ McCarthy, but I
Same.
said on this show, I'd rather go with the wide receivers unless I had a true conviction about that player. And I did not necessarily have that with JJ, who I think is going to have a really good career with Justin Jefferson.
Yeah,
and TJ Hawkins and Kevin
it's as
O'Connell.
good a fit as he could have possibly
Yeah,
got. And
exactly.
Kevin O'Connell, it's the system he needs. He literally got the perfect thing. And he may end up being, because of that, a much better quarterback than a Drake May or even a Caleb Williams. You wouldn't be surprised to see it. It's how much situation matters. Though I do like what the Bears have done for Caleb, man. I mean, Roma Dunze, Keenan Allen, and DJ Moore in year 1. I just don't know just get him in a dome. I still want him in a dome. I don't want Caleb playing outdoor in that cold Chicago wind. But, I think it was fair to say, Nick, that we weren't in the camp that some I had something just pop up there, a little, those ESPN things. But we weren't in the camp of just take a quarterback to take a quarterback. So I think what happened for us is, in my mind at least, Giants GM Joe Schoen played this draft pretty well. He essentially came into this thing thinking, I have a conviction on Caleb Williams. I have a conviction on Drake May. And the Caleb thing is something I had heard a long time ago. The Giants had engaged in talks with the Bears back in January when the Bears were waffling on trading that first pick or keeping Justin Fields. They were denied pretty fast in the process, and they made their move to Drake May. And they went hard on May, from what I've heard, all leading up to this draft, and made their best offer they could. But in the end, that offer wasn't there. So in my mind, he played it better. Instead of forcing QB, he took the best player on the board at a position of need. And what this does for the Giants, Nick, is this. It doesn't take them out of quarterback market for 2025. And to be quite frank, if they had picked a quarterback here that wasn't the quarterback they have a full conviction on, it would have taken them out of the quarterback market for 2026 too. So now we're out of that, and we're kind of back in the same position we were in, unless those quarterbacks obviously evolve into better players than the Giants feel they can be, clearly. Because look, if the Giants felt like these guys were as great prospects as May and Williams, they would have just taken one at 6, or maybe they would have even traded all the way up to 5. I still don't think that the Cardinals were moving off Harrison and are taking any risk there. It kind of feels like the Chargers weren't risking losing Joe Alt either, by the way, Nick.
It doesn't seem like that. So, you know what? You have to look at the situation, the entire context, and realize the Giants got a good football player and a difference-making football player. That's the way I'm looking at this. I hope everything off the field checks out. I have no opinions on that. It's just stuff that you hear, right? Like the gun charge, it got dropped. A lot of people say it wasn't that big of a deal. So you take that into account. But at the end of the day, you have someone who will be your alpha wide receiver, somebody who it's 3rd and 6, you need a play, you could throw it to this individual, and hopefully he ends up catching it. And he can also take it to the house because he has that in his wheelhouse.
And one thing I like that you said about Malik Nabers, and we can get into, I want to get into your synopsis right after this. Just a reminder, I know you already went over it, Nick, on our draft profile, but I think it's worth refreshing. And there are sometimes just new fans who are listening to the show or haven't heard it. So if you don't mind getting into that, I think you tweeted it tonight, but I'm not positive. I thought I saw that. There's been a lot going on tonight, so I can't remember everything I've seen, Nick. But one thing that you mentioned was that ability to kind of turn up after the catch and create that yards after catch, which is phenomenal. One thing I love about his game is his contact balance. I really feel like for a wide receiver, he has very unique contact balance. It's not Kadarius Toney. That's like the top level of it. But it's a lot better than a lot of these prospects. He reminded me in a lot of ways of some of the better prospects I've seen come out at this wide receiver position. And that's something that was really interesting that I really didn't see till today when someone showed me it. Do you know, Nick, that he has a very, very eerily similar athletic profile to Jamar Chase? I don't really think they're exactly the same prospects from just thinking back to Chase's tape and what I watched at LSU with him. But it is odd that they have almost identical athletic profiles from an RAS standpoint. And I do think there is some power to Malik Nabers' game that could be unlocked the next level. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's an astute point. One thing I'll say is Jamar Chase to me. Now, remember, Jamar Chase didn't play that final year at LSU because of the COVID year. So we're watching tape of him when he was like 19 years old, and he was still so damn commanding and demanding at the catch point. He was an absolute beast at the catch point. I think Malik Nabers has some really good tape at the catch point. It's not to the level of Rome Odunze, and I just don't think it was to the level of Jamar Chase. But to your point, I still think he's really strong when it comes to yak. He is a pain in the ass to get down on the ground because he catches the ball and then he avoids you because he gets north to south so damn quickly. And you really need to tee him up and square him up to bring him down to the deck. And even when you do that, he runs really low with the football like a running back. And to your point, The contact balance is elite when he gets hit. Not Kadarius Toney, but it's still elite, and he's a very difficult player to bring down to the deck. So, I think those are all really good points by you.
And you know what I find interesting, Nick? You mentioned earlier about like what the expectation could be in year one. I in my one only mock for CBS Sports, I predict the Giants would take Nabers at 6. I actually nailed basically the first 6 picks. 5 of the first 6. The only one I got wrong was 5, where I had the Chargers trading up for McCarthy there. They didn't have to ultimately move up that far. But within my synopsis, Nick, what I said was the Giants miss out on the quarterback market, but not for lack of trying. They stuck to their board. If the Patriot had passed on May, I had the Patriots going May in my mock. It would have been the Giants and not the Vikings trading up for him. I explained that why. And then what I got into here was there was discussion. Instead, I said they didn't have the same conviction for McCarthy. So instead, they take a wide receiver who's as electric and explosive a prospect as we've seen since Jalen Waddle. I said there's some discussion they might prefer Rome Odunze. And this is something, by the way, I confirmed listening to Dable and Shane after in their presser. But while the Washington prospect might better fit their depth chart, Nabers fits the system and scheme best. And he really does, because they have said from the start they want separation from these receivers first and foremost. And I said, they preach that from the start. And I said Nabers will immediately provide a home run threat for a team that lost its only home run threat in Saquon Barkley. I said while the quarterback room Nabers enters is arguably one of the NFL's worst, with Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito, I do believe that it's probably one of the 5 worst. His skill set doesn't require back shoulder or tight window pass attempts, which I said was Jones's kryptonite. Jones can get the ball to Nabers on RPOs, drag routes, quick hitting first reads designed to just get him the ball in the hands. We've seen Mike Kafka and Dable design those types of routes for Wan'Dale Robinson and other weapons. The same will be the case for him. I said Nabers' upside as a vertical threat, however, at least in year one, will be capped. Nabers will ultimately end up in a similar, and then now I gave a little fantasy. So I think that's a fair expectation that we might not see the vertical receiver, at least in year one, that he was at LSU.
I think it's fair because at LSU, it was rare verticality just in that offense. And Jaden Daniels delivered well in that offense with all those receivers. But one aspect of Malik Nabers' game that I think just meshes so damn well with what Brian Dable and Mike Kafka want to do is pre-snap, getting him on the move. Yes. There were so many times throughout LSU's tape where they would run play action slide, or they would just slide him underneath a tight end who was lead blocking with a little touch pass, a little flip pass, something of that nature. And it's like, okay, defensive back, now you need to work over the top of this tight end's block, and you need to scrape over the top and then locate Nabers if you're successful in doing so. You're going to see so much of that behind the line of scrimmage with Nabers, with Daniel Bellinger blocking in front of him. And it's not even just that. It's motioning. You have a 3-by-1 set, you motion Nabers, get the defense to adjust to a 2-by-2 set, and then you snap the football before he even sets. You have him run out like he's exploding outward, and then you just angle him back inside. There was a touchdown, I think, against Army like that this past season with LSU. My point being is pre-snap, Malik Nabers is going to put the fear of God into the defense because he is so explosive. And if you can create mismatches, if the defense does decide to run man coverage, and you can get him isolated against a big nickel or a safety, it's going to be tragic for the defense. So now you have Wan'Dale, Jalen Hyatt, and Malik Nabers. All 3 of those players can kind of do that. You have a very fast wide receiving core. And I think Malik Nabers is now just going to be the catalyst to that. But Wan'Dale underneath, with Malik Nabers being vertical, Hyatt being vertical, there's just a lot of different things you can do. It's just at the end of the day, you need to have a quarterback who is going to execute when those small windows do appear. And hopefully Drew Lock or Daniel Jones can be that with the offensive line is improved.
Yeah, if that offensive line improves, then that's going to be something we discuss. And obviously, as we go to the end of the show, which I didn't even mention at the top, Nick, but I'm sure we'll want to discuss some day 2 targets as well at the end of this thing. But, there could be some offensive linemen there that they could work on in that round. We'll see what happens in day 2, rounds 2 and 3. We'll see what happens. The fun news for us, Nick, is a side note, but we get both of our picks for tomorrow because we could have lost it if we traded up for a quarterback. So at least we get that. That's a very fun thing. And I think you make a good point. The way I see this offense running, I just think there's going to be a lot of layup opportunities for Daniel Jones to get the ball to Malik Nabers. They may not be, because I'm just thinking of that LSU offense. There were so many of those quick inbreakers that he had so much space for Jaden Daniels to throw the ball to. Maybe that's partially because it was LSU's system, the college rules, and how, we see defenses play college. But some of them felt like it was because the DB was playing so far off Nabers because he just doesn't want to get destroyed by Nabers on another slot vert. And it's not like that can't happen in the NFL. Yes, space is constricted and it's not the same. But at the same time, we're going to see DBs playing off from this dude. They're not going to press him, I don't think, in my mind. I know he has to work on his release back. Something we talk about. It's not the same as a Dunze or Harrison, but he has one sick release, the speed release, and that's basically all Antonio Brown had his whole career, in my mind at least, and it worked every time. He developed other things, but like that release worked every time when he tried to use it.
You're not wrong, but he has routes on his tape where it's like, oh, because he has the type of body control and the fluidity to sink his hips and then just get north. Again, it's that immediacy, it's that suddenness and that quick acceleration. He had a couple routes against Arkansas and Ole Miss and missing off leverage. He eats into your leverage so quickly. And the defensive back, he doesn't want to really come off of his platform and give too much space to Malik Nabers as Malik Nabers is just quickly accelerating into his cushion. So he backpedals and it gives Malik Nabers enough space. All Malik Nabers has to do is just pretend like he's sinking his hips and then he just goes, man. And that's something we've seen Mike Kafka run several times with Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins on the outside. We saw it a lot in the Week 16 game in 2022 against Minnesota. I think the one play that Isaiah Hodgins that we always talk about, beautiful throw by Daniel Jones up the sideline, that Isaiah Hodgins gets it. It was on a play similar to that. Now just imagine Malik Nabers running those types of routes, right? Now, to your point though, the press coverage, how is he going to handle that? If you can't really win with your hands, because that's one thing about Malik Nabers' game that I was underwhelmed with, is defeating press coverage without just using your agility, your lateral quickness, and your one release where you kind of dip your inside shoulder or you dip your outside shoulder and run around the jam attempt. How can he, if he's going up against a Sauce Gardner, how can he really win at the line of scrimmage with his hands? I haven't necessarily seen a lot of that yet. But from a physicality standpoint, Arkansas tried to impose on him, as did Florida State. And I thought Renardo Green actually did a pretty good job, the Florida State defensive back who might be drafted tomorrow, right? But Arkansas really tried to press him, and they were DPIing him like crazy. And you watch Malik Nabers fighting through the contact and making the catches on these curls and these comeback routes. So, yes, he's not Roma Dunze type of play strength, but I don't think he's weak either. And I think you get him with Mike Groh and you get him with some coaching. He'll develop some hand technique to defeat press coverage. There really isn't a lot of glaring weaknesses in Nabers' game. Like, you know me, man. I'm a tough grader. I had a 7.1. I had a 7.12 grade on him, which means top 15. And people listening are probably like, "Oh, of course he's a top 15 pick, you idiot."
No, for you, that's great. You're a tough grader. I've seen these grades. Your grading scale is wild.
Yeah, so I don't give a lot of top 15 grades. Thank you. I don't give a lot of top 15 grades to anybody. Yeah. So he had a top 15 grade. And again, I just don't really see anything that's glaring on his profile that makes you say, oh man, this guy is going to be a problem.
I mean, he became the second receiver in LSU history to post back-to-back 1,000-yard seasons. And he did it in his age 19 campaign. This dude's just turning 20. And that was something both Joe Schoen and Brian Dable mentioned multiple times because it's a big factor. Breakout age is very important. Prospect age is very important. Joe Schoen has been doing this since he got here to the Giants, drafting really young players because he believes for a lot of reasons they can grow into and project them into a different player as they grow into their body. And one thing I'll be looking for, because that's just something I noticed just doing some research on him before when we were doing our profile, he had over 100 go and hitch routes in 2023. He had less than 40 of every other route. And that's partially because of the system that LSU ran. But it's something that I consider because, you know, it's not exactly entirely something I saw Jalen Hyatt running some go and hitch routes. Like, it's part of the Giants offense. It's not to say it's not, but it's not, in my opinion, something that Daniel Jones is like a specialty quarterback in, kind of like that type of thing. So I'm going to be interested to see. And one thing to remember too, especially when you're drafting a 19-year-old, 20-year-old player like him, turning 20. He might have already turned 20, by the way. I don't know for sure, Nick. But it's not just about what's going to happen now in 2024. Let's be honest, unless Daniel Jones takes a massive jump this year, he's not going to be or takes a massive pay cut in 2025. They're not going to allocate 20% of their cap to Daniel Jones next year unless he takes the jump, because they just saw what Tyrod Taylor could do at $10 million against the cap and Tommy DeVito. And to be fair and quite honest, yes, the situations are different, but it's not like Daniel Jones was blowing them out of the water better than those two. Let's be honest. Even if you don't want to say that Tyrod was better than Jones, you can at least say that they were about the same, if anything. And then you're not really paying $45 million to get about the same as Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito. So obviously he has to take a massive jump for that to happen. So I know some Giants fans are, but that's just not how I'm thinking. I'm thinking of it like the Giants have a 20-year-old prospect who I think is one of for me, the best receivers I've scouted since we started doing this whole thing. Yeah. Like, I have a very high grade on him. And that's just something that excites me. That's an asset for this team. It's not maybe doesn't do anything for 2024. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. Maybe the Giants can be good next year. We don't know yet. I'm not ready to say one way or the other, Nick, but I know that this is the type of asset that could potentially help them long term for sure. And that's what has me excited about this pick.
Same here. Same here. You got to look at the long term. I mean, the Giants built it out in Daniel Jones' contracts deliberately. That wasn't just an accident. And they're more than likely, like you said, going to get away from that contract at some point. Now you have Malik Nabers for another 4 years under contract. And by that point, he'll be what, 24, 25 years old. So
which is crazy,
I understand.
By the way.
I know he's so young. I understand why Giants, because I think Dan and I were both in the same boat. I think we all expected maybe the Giants would land a Drake May and get a franchise quarterback. It didn't happen. But we shouldn't look at the Malik Nabers pick like, oh, this sucks. You know, it's like, no, you got a good football player and your offense is going to be much better with the presence of Malik Nabers. And that offense needed some freaking help because it sucked last year. And Saquon Barkley was on the team. Okay. And Saquon's not here anymore. So now you add Malik Nabers and we'll see what the rushing attack can do. Hopefully the offensive line can hold up. And I don't know what we're going to get from the quarterback position, honestly.
And some Giants fans aren't going to want to hear this, Nick, but I think most will at this point. Saquon Barkley had one run of 40-plus yards in the last 2 seasons, and you watched him get chased down in that Philadelphia Eagles game 2 years ago. And if you think he had the same second gear that he had before all the injuries, you're wrong. Right now, Malik Nabers is a more explosive athlete, prospect, player on the field post-catch than Saquon Barkley. You don't want to agree with that? Fine. I don't really care because it's obvious on tape, and I think it's going to be obvious throughout the rest of their career. No offense to Saquon Barkley. He's an older running back now, taking a million hits and had injuries. Malik Nabers is 20 years old, and you could watch the difference in speed. So in my mind, Nick, they actually added more explosiveness to the team than they had last year by even subtracting Barkley and going to a player like Nabers. And I think, like you said earlier, they're going to find ways pre-snap motion to get him the football. It's going to be a lot of like layups for the quarterback, and that's fine. This is a quarterback who, in my opinion, needs layups because he's not good when he's asked to drop back and process and take time and intermediate deep routes, because that's just not anticipate where they're going to be, the windows, the whole shots against coverage. This is not him. Let him get the ball out quick and then let these guys do the work like a Malik Nabers. And does it cap him as a vertical receiver? Yes, because at some point in our career, and it could even be this year, Jones could take a step, but we're going to start to see like sick ass LSU, New York Giants, Odell Beckham-esque double moves that turn to long touchdowns in stride throws, like 70-yard game-changing plays. He's capable of that, and it's not just capable of that. We're going to see him do it. Don't you agree with that at some point, even this year?
Of course. Yeah. And you can align Nabers anywhere too. Like this is like more of a Z wide receiver. You want to break it down Z, X, or slot. Mm-hmm. He played so much in the slot though. I think he can play outside. He's not your traditional X type of wide receiver, but there's going to be packages that Catholic is going to have where they might put him isolated as the backside X, or they could put him at the 3. And you have Hyatt. Hyatt's going to be this dangerous wide receiver that should dictate coverage just based off of his speed. Wan'Dale Robinson underneath. You have a very potent 11 personnel package right now with Malik Nabers. We've always said we like Wan'Dale Robinson a lot. We like the idea of Jalen Hyatt. We haven't really seen it. We saw it a little bit in the Patriot game. But now you have 3 really young wide receivers who, whoever the quarterback is after 2024, they're going to have these 3 wide receivers to deal with. And you could be much worse. Giant fans, you know this. You could be much worse than what the Giants currently have at the wide receiver position. The Giants haven't had a wide receiving group this young with the potential, with this much talent in how long, Dan?
I think this is, I love the wide receiver core it stands right now. And we should, by the way, Nick, because, and this is something to consider, by the way, because it's something that we discussed with Jerry Reese and a little bit of struggles in his back end. Giants have now drafted a wide receiver in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd round in all 3 of Joe Schoen's drafts. Like, he has invested a lot in this wide receiver position. It should be amazing. And I honestly feel like this is going to evolve into one of the better wide receiver rooms in the NFL. It may not show up in the stats, but like, I look at things like last year, like Jalen Hyatt's Raiders game last year, that was an amazing game on film. He was open all the time in that game. Part of it was because, Graham was rolling coverage away from the field side and just daring Jones to just throw into wide open space. And Jones was just processing it so slowly and just really, and it's okay. Like, that was one of the worst games of Daniel Jones' career. A lot of people say first game back from injury, give him a break. That's fine. But Jalen Hyatt gets open. And so does Darius Slayton, who we didn't even mention, who's now depth. And so does Isaiah Hodgins, who was good, but last year, I guess, bad, but really just the whole quarterback O-line situation was bad. So I think we have depth at the wide receiver position for the first time in quite some time. We've been talking for years now, Nick, about injuries hit wide receiver, and now we're down to, like, what's his name? David Sills playing a big role, playing 60 snaps a game. Those days are gone. We're not going to have David Sills running routes anymore, okay? Like, worst case scenario, you're going to have Hodgins in there or Slayton if a lot of injuries hit. And don't even think that's going to be the case because Nabers is a really tough player. And by the way, Dable and Schoen talked about that as well. They talked about how his toughness shows up on tape, and they talk to people in that program, and he plays through injuries. Like, he is not coming off this field, and you can see it the way he plays football. He's a very tough player, and he's built well, in my opinion, to withstand hits at the NFL level. I want to talk about a lot with you, Nick. I have a bunch of 30,000-foot view questions I want to ask you at some point, but I want to keep it on specific Nabers stuff for now. And let me just go over some interesting nuggets with Nabers. Nabers is the highest draft pick the Giants spent on a wide receiver in their 100-year history. So I thought that was really interesting. 6th overall, Ike Hilliard was before that. He was also another Giants first-round pick who showed up on the Hey Rookie show. There's only like 6 guys who are on that show, Nick, every year. And somehow the Giants have like taken somebody from the Hey Rookie, I think, like every year in the last 3, if not 2 of the last 3. So just a weird coincidence, I guess, there. Just something that I thought was interesting. They asked Malik Nabers in an interview who was the first NFL jersey he bought, and it was Odell Beckham Jr., who, as we said, Nick, throughout this process, it's hard to not think of him when you're watching the LSU tape. You don't want to do that because it is lazy, but it's hard not to. He was also a player who you first watched on film, I feel like, of all the potential Giants targets, and you texted me immediately like, this is going to be a Dan Schneider kind of player. And we said that about Tank Dell last year. We said that about Nabers this year. These are our kind of guys, these bursty accelerator type wide receivers. And yeah, maybe the Giants seem like they need a 6'3" guy, depth chart wise, fit wise. No, they need a bursty accelerator on this roster. They don't really have one at this kind of caliber. So just thought that was interesting as well. Dable used the word multiple times, dog, to describe him. And I think one point that I wanted to bring up before we get into some of these quotes is that I don't think that this. What are you laughing at?
I'm just laughing at the term dog because I understand what it means, but then I think about my fat bulldog just laying on the couch, just with his legs open, like looking like so embarrassing. And I'm just like, that's not the dog I'm thinking of. Hopefully that's not the dog we're receiving.
Hopefully that's not the dog we're getting. To be fair, though, and shout out Phoenix, your dog. Yeah. If he wanted to, that dude has fucking power. He's got power in him. And now he's losing weight these days too. He's really cutting down. He's getting ripped. So Phoenix he might have heard what you said. I don't know what room he's in, but you better be careful because Phoenix is starting to get a little powerful. He's got that base, really a little bit. He's strong. Like a little fullback. Phoenix
plays with low leverage, man.
He plays with such low leverage, Phoenix. Yeah. And I've met Phoenix, and when he plays you, he can get physical and aggressive too. So I want to give a shout out to Phoenix there. But yeah, I know what you mean by that. Like he's like, sometimes dogs are just chilling. But one thing I wanted to bring up with you, I feel confident. And this is something that's been discussed. I listened to his interview with Madeline Burke after he was picked. I really liked it. I know some people didn't like some of the things that happened pre-draft with Malik Nabers. He was going on some lives talking about the Giants quarterback situation, and his buddies were laughing at the Daniel Jones thing, like that he was their quarterback. I don't think that was him. I think it was like his friends in the background laughing at Jones or whatever it was. I think the character is fine from what I've seen. I don't foresee this being, and I know he had the potential gun charge thing, which Joe Schoen talked about as well. I can get to those quotes. Do you think this? I don't think this is any chance of being a DeAndre Baker, Kadarius Toney type situation. What are your thoughts on that? I feel confident we're not going to have to go through that again.
I can't say I feel confident. I have no idea. There's just
Can
really
I tell
no
you why
way.
I feel that way?
Please do. Yes.
I think in the past with Baker and with Toney types, there just wasn't a lot of time spent on the individual. For example, they asked Gettleman or whatever after the draft, like, what, Toney, this is out of nowhere. He's like, no, we had a great meeting at the combine. We were up to like 12:30 a.m. laughing. And then that was it. They didn't take him out for the private visit, didn't do the dinners, all this time they spent on Malik Nabers trying to get to know him with Coach Dable and GM. They're just like, we had a good time at the combine. That was great. We're laughing at 12:30 a.m. He's got a great bubbly personality. That's not what you're looking for. That's not how you get to know a person. I think now when they do this new thing with Schoen, where they're really they're pouring these assets and resources into flying them in for private visits, workouts, taking them out to dinners, really getting to know them with everybody. It just makes a difference to me. And we haven't had it yet in the Schoen era, and he really has continued to do this. So to me, there's a difference there in just the time spent, specifically with Kadarius Toney and DeAndre Baker.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's correct. There's really nothing I can weigh into this. I had no conversations with them. I know some of the things off the field the Giant fans took exception to. It wasn't a great look, but that doesn't mean the kid is bad at all. He's now in the building. You have to trust Joe Schoen, trust the front office. I think the process that Joe Schoen has used, although it hasn't yielded the best results, it's the process that he's used has proven to be superior to what Dave Gettleman used when Dave Gettleman was selecting players like Kadarius Toney. So I don't know. I'm not gonna say I'm confident because there's just no way for me to know. But I am trusting this front office that they selected a good kid who's going to come in here and work hard. And he supposedly did that at LSU too. So let's move on with it, and hopefully he can access that high ceiling that he has, man, because the ceiling is really high with Malik Nabers. And I think he can really help this offense actually create some damn explosive plays, which they freaking cannot ever do.
Right. Even if it's him catching the ball 3 yards down the field and just taking it for another
behind
40.
the line of scrimmage. Doesn't matter to me, bro.
Yeah. Just
what
give him a layup.
What if Malik Nabers actually gets the Giants? His skill set allows the Giants to run a successful screen. Could you imagine that?
Yeah, right. Use him in the screen game. That could be interesting. But just to further the point we're discussing on that, Joe Schoen said we have an extensive process in terms of background on this. What happened? Our head of security, Jerry Mead, does a phenomenal job for us. We have other resources that reach out to and use, whether it's boots on the ground on campus in the cities. Brian Dable said, I enjoyed the meetings we had with him, plural meetings. I love his personality, things like that. Joe Schoen said, we were at his pro day. We had him on a top 30 visit, and we went to dinner with him a couple different times. So we got to get around the kid a lot. He's a great kid. He's super competitive. He's driven, and I'm excited about having him. Joe Schoen said that he saw him once as well. And just to further another point I talked about earlier, he had the shoulder injury that he played through, and Joe Schoen said that was legit. It was a legit injury. And he said, talking to the trainers and the medical staff, this guy didn't miss a beat. Whatever it was, he's going to fight through it. He's tough. He does not miss games, and he does not miss practices. That was a key one to me. The Giants have had some issues in the past, Nick, with players missing practices, I feel like, and just not playing through injuries in practice. That's not something he's going to do. They said he's going to play, and that's just how this kid is wired. So I thought that was really interesting to hear.
Good. He has a dog mentality, as they like to say.
Yeah, the actual dog mentality there.
Think about like a pit bull. He has a pit bull mentality, right?
Yes, exactly. They also asked Joe Schoen, why, maybe to give away some of the reasons why you had Malik Nabers over Rome Odunze. And he said, not that Rome doesn't have all these things, but at the same time, he's kind of saying that Malik Nabers was better at these things. And he said it was Malik's toughness, separation, and speed. And you know what? I really feel like when it comes down to that, he is like, all those marks are really high for him.
I agree. And the one thing about Rome Odunze's film that it didn't irritate me, but I was like, I wish he broke more tackles, because there was no denying that Malik Nabers, what it seemed like he was a tougher guy to bring down, despite the fact that he was a little bit smaller than Rome Odunze. And I just felt like Odunze didn't create yak as well as Malik Nabers, not just through the acceleration and the athletic traits, but also through contact. Like Malik Nabers, if you just try to arm tackle him, you're not bringing him down. If you go high on him, you're not bringing him down. You have to really wrap him up and drive him to the deck to get Malik Nabers on the ground. And that's just one of his many very, very, I would say, effective traits that it's going to translate on Sunday. And that's what we should be looking forward to.
Yeah, and we will be. And you know what? There is some upside to the idea of Daniel Jones now has, he's going into his third year in this system versus if they had a rookie quarterback going into his first year in the system. It's possible that maybe, they can take some of what LSU did and really use Malik on slot verts and things of that nature to get him going on the vertical plane where we know he can run great double moves and get himself open. And then hopefully Jones can just see it fast like Tyrod did last year. Drop back 3 steps and let it rip and just trust what you see pre-snap and try to get the ball out there into space. It's not impossible. He's it's an extra year in the system. At least he doesn't have to start over, Jones learning a system. And ultimately it is going to come down to him, Nick, trying to figure it out. But I want to think it's possible, Nick, that we can't. I want to think it's possible. I don't have to just sit here now on April 26th and be like, nope, it's over. We have no vertical game with Nabers next year because we haven't seen it in 5 years. Maybe in year 6, he can just figure it out with better blocking and things of that nature. I mean, he was throwing vertical balls in 2019, not against all the good defenses. I know he had like 8 of his touchdowns in 2 games or whatever it was against Washington, whatever, that 2019. But the ball was getting out vertically a little more often. So I want to think it's possible, Nick. I don't want to sit here now and think that we can just use Malik Nabers on short stuff this year. I think there's got to be some hope that the vertical game can get going with this kid.
There's going to be plays that Daniel Jones is going to see. He's going to let it rip.
Yeah.
Right? Like overall, Daniel Jones likes to operate within 5, 6, 7 yards of the line of scrimmage. But there are times where the plays are dialed up. His first read is going to be, I'm going to read this safety. They're going to run higher to Wandale towards the safety to hold him. Jones is going to be tasked. That's my first read. Okay, Nabers has that step to the inside, fire the football. And Nabers, he's going to be able to create that separation. He's the 3-level impact receiver. That's who you got. And that's going to help Daniel Jones access the parts of his game that he hasn't necessarily displayed consistently.
I love that point by you. I love that. And the point that I like the most is that he's a 3-level winner. That's what we say all the time. We're looking for those 3-level winners. He's going to win right away if you get him the football. He's going to win on the intermediate. And I loved how he operated on the intermediate with Jaden Daniels in that offense. And I hope that Jones can do that. I'm not sold Jones can get him the vertical game. I'm hoping, but I am more sold that he can get him an intermediate game. I mean, it's on Jones again to use that area of the field, something he never really used at Duke, but on a consistent basis hasn't in the NFL. But it just throw a little more anticipation. Trust Nabers. He's your best guy you've ever had here. So you just trust him to win these routes. Something I thought was interesting about his interview with the Giants, Nick, he said that he already that he's a big fan of Jalen Hyatt. He knows him well, and he already has a relationship with Jalen Hyatt. He said, we built a relationship along the way. I asked him a few questions about the organization when I was on a visit. He told me great things. I watched him when he was in college. Tremendous athlete, amazing speed, underrated hands. He was also the Biletnikoff winner, so you know it's going to be a lot of competition in that room. So I'm excited to get to know those guys and hit the field with those guys. So I think that's pretty cool that he comes in with it with a relationship with Hyatt.
Yeah, I mean, you want there to be continuity in the wide receiver room. You want to know another thing, just from a skill perspective that I like. He's a good route runner. I would say that there is so much still room for development, which makes me even more excited about him. Like a lot of the highlight routes, like those double moves, and it's typically when there's off coverage by a lot, because a lot of these defenses were playing off coverage against LSU because of how dynamic Jaden Daniels was and how dynamic Brian Thomas and Malik Nabers were. But there are still ways that Nabers can refine that route running a little bit and develop it and even make him a more potent and effective weapon. And that in and of itself, man, combining him with Mike Rowe, I just think there's a ceiling that we might not even have thought about yet with Malik Nabers.
I agree with you on that because I think about it like this, Nick, and this is going to sound crazy to say, but I think about these like powerful, explosive, and sudden prospects at the receiver position, separation, whatever you want to call it, special fluidity, and he has all of these things. And I think about like, this is going to sound nuts, but I think about what Justin Jefferson came out as the 23rd pick in the draft. No one at the time, if you had said Justin Jefferson is going to be the best receiver in the NFL, they would have said you were crazy. But when you watched him at LSU, he was fluid. He was explosive. He was all of these traits that Malik Nabers is. And now he's one of, if not most people think he's the best wide receiver in the NFL. And I kind of feel like he has that kind of ceiling. It's crazy to say, but these are the types of receivers in my mind who have the best chance of being the best in the NFL. Those separator types, those explosive fluid types. I'm not going to say he is that, and obviously quarterback play is going to play a role in that because Kirk Cousins did get him the football. Kirk Cousins maybe is not elite, but he's great at getting the football to wide receivers and throwing with anticipation and using all three levels of the field. So I don't know. I see a lot of upside with this prospect.
Yeah, there definitely is. I mean, I think he, according to Dane Brugler, had 34 catches of 20 plus yards in 2023, which led the FBS. I want to say that might be more than the New York Giants had in the entire, from a passing standpoint for sure, I believe, in the entire 2022 season where they won a playoff game.
It probably had to be. I remember that number was just so low. I believe they were dead last in explosive pass plays.
They were.
In 2022. So we've said it a bunch, and we know it by this point. But it is crazy. And you know what else? I mean, if you look at the trends and analytics are one thing, I know we don't want to put too much into it, though. I know me and you are open to analytics.
Of course.
One of the most sticky stats, the stickiest stat of all sticky stats when it comes to projection and from an analytics standpoint, what will lead to success at the next level is yards per route run. That's the stat. That's the sticky stat. And he led all wide receivers 364 yards per route run, including Marvin Harrison Jr., including all of those players. Now, is part of that because LSU's offense was set up the way it was? Sure. But at the same time, when you watch it, you can just see that every route this kid runs, the acceleration is different. The explosion is different. You know, one thing that I like about his game, too, that I think is a little bit maybe hasn't been discussed as much. I think he has got nuances to his game. Like, in my opinion, he has good ball tracking on the vertical plane. I also think he has shown me a situation where he has late hands and he does little things like that to try to, disguise himself in the defensive back and where the football is going to be. So I feel like there is some nuance to his game that maybe has gone a little overlooked potentially.
No, I think that's a good point, Dan. A little bit, right? I think
Yeah.
we all just get enamored by the fact that he is this good of an athlete. So that's like the
Yeah.
number one. And then we somewhat pigeonhole him as just, oh, he's just this athletic guy like that. There's still a little bit more nuance. Like, again, I want to see more of an expanded release package. I think it's something that he could definitely develop. I think he could improve his route running, but he still has deceptiveness up his stem and plays that are just like, dude, he just turned that safety around, and the safety, you see him just trying to run. It's like, dude, there's no way. This guy is a second, a third gear. He tempos his routes well as well. So there is nuance to Malik Nabers. He's not just this athletic freak.
Yeah, and I think the Giants are going to find it really fast. I have a question for you. We can start to get into some of these more 30,000-foot questions. Let me do one more fun quote that I saw throughout doing this. He had the most forced tackles since 2022 by any other play. He has the most forced tackles of any receiver in this draft class, or I think any receiver overall since 2022, with 51 forced missed tackles in 2 seasons, dude. That is insane in its own right, like for a wide receiver. But running backs can have more touches, they're going to get more. For a wide receiver, that's not easy to do. So I thought that was another cool stat. I have a question for you about like where this kind of leads the Giants. What do you think about what happens with Darius Slayton now? So he hasn't shown up for voluntary OTAs. There's been rumors that he wants a new contract despite signing one last year. The Giants have him at a bargain rate, but this kind of puts his playing time in a weird spot because they want to move up Hyatt. They want to feature Wandale, and they're not going to be running a ton of 10 personnel, I don't think. So, we're going to get 3 receivers on the field. Obviously, injuries happen, but do you think there's a chance we might see Darius Slayton traded for a day 3 pick tomorrow or the day after?
There's certainly a chance. I don't know if it's going to actually happen. I think they love Darius Slayton. I think they really like him, but there might be teams who are trying to get wide receivers, and there's a lot of wide receivers in this draft class, Dan. But there might be teams trying to get wide receivers. They don't get them, and they're like, we like Darius Slayton. We could take him in for 1 year. Those teams might be on teams that are trying to compete in the immediate, whereas the Giants aren't necessarily there. So I think they would like for Darius Slayton to be in. But if Darius Slayton and his agent are playing hardball, the Giants can get a rookie contract on day 3 for him when he's probably not going to be here beyond the 2024 season. Yeah, I think Joe Schoen would trade him. And I think they probably should in that case if there's going to be some sort of situation that's awkward.
Yeah, it's going to be weird because I don't know if it is an awkward situation just yet, but I'm curious if because you're at a turning point in your career as Darius Slayton, and now you're in a position where you might not get the playing time you're hoping to get. So I'll be curious to see how that happens. And I'll say this, Nick, I didn't love that. And we started to pick up at least at the end of round 1, but I don't love that when I look at my big board right now, a lot of my top ranked players are wide receivers because the Giants can't really take another wide receiver on day 2. So it's just kind of waste. And then, no, you're not going to go another way. I mean, if they go
no, that's not what I'm insinuating. I'm saying there are some dudes.
Oh, no, I have we'll get to our wish list. I have my wish list. I want to hear yours. There are some great players left, but I will say that some of my favorite players are wide receivers. Thankfully, Ricky Pearsall went, Xavier Worthy. So we're starting to get some come off the board. If you're the Giants right now, you want to hear wide receivers every single pick tomorrow, as many as you can. The other thing is you kind of need to hear Ben Powers-Johnson and Zach Frazier come off the board as well, because I have them graded high. I like them better than what I thought John Michael Schmitz from a projection standpoint, considerably better. For me, at least, on Ben Powers-Johnson, not so much Frazier, but both better. I want to hear them both come off the board because the Giants are not taking a center tomorrow, right? So if we can get those 2 off the board, that's a great sign. And to be quite honest with you, Nick, I kind of want to hear edges come off the board tomorrow before the Giants pick, because we could use another edge as a rotation, and I know, but I would much rather have an interior defensive lineman or an offensive lineman or a defensive back personally with that next pick. So if I can get, again, wide receiver, what did I just say? Wide receiver, quarterbacks. If there's more to come off the board, screw it, whatever. I don't really need quarterback at this point. And then obviously the other positions we discussed. And we can get the wish list at some point. But before we get that, I want to kind of talk some other stuff with you. I want to ask in your mind where this leaves Daniel Jones. Obviously, the Giants did not trade up for a quarterback. At this point, my guess, Nick, is that they will not use a pick on a quarterback. I'll give you my reason for that. My reason for that is I kind of get this weird feeling they're higher on DeVito than we think they are, just from some of the things Joe Schoen said, and not obviously as their long-term future. I'm not saying that, but I'm saying as their QB2 potentially of long-term if they can continue to develop him. in which case all they would need is a QB1 of long-term, because Drew Lock is probably a one and done unless they kind of like what they see and he plays more than we think this year, which is also a possibility. So if you add a quarterback now, like a prospect, you're kind of, you have no chance really for DeVito, right? Even as it stands now, it's kind of hard to imagine the Giants carrying 3 quarterbacks this year. But if you add a 4th to the mix, it just gets really muddy at that point. So what do you think on that? First of all, before we get to where does it leave Daniel Jones, do you think the Giants are still in the market to potentially take a quarterback on day 2 or 3?
I think they're still in the market. I like what your point about Tommy DeVito, and I think they made it clear that they want a quarterback too. And if it's homegrown Tommy DeVito at that
Right.
price and he's going to remain cheap, then yeah, that's excellent. I don't want to say waste, but spend a pick. Now, I don't think they believe they have the long-term quarterback in-house right now.
Quarterback one you're talking about, right?
Yeah. I don't think they have the long-term quarterback one in-house. So if they think any of these quarterbacks might have that, yeah, I think they would take a day 3 flyer on that player. So I'm not going to rule out quarterback right now. But to your point, Drew Lock, man, that's an interesting one too. Who knows, right?
Very interesting one.
I know Rich Eisen said that, Daniel Jones is going to be ready to start the season. I think that's poppycock, right? Like
he's going to be ready.
Jones, yeah, I think he mentioned something to the effect.
Yeah, he doesn't know. No one knows how this time.
Yeah, and I said, like, how the hell do you know that right now?
No, he does. Rich Eisen doesn't know when Daniel Jones is going to be ready. The only thing we know for sure on that front is what Brian Daboll said, which is Drew Lock's going to take the majority, if not all, of the reps during the spring. That's a big sign. Like, Drew Lock is going to get QB1 reps working with Nabers, working with Hyatt, working with Wandell, getting that timing report down all spring into potentially the start of training camp. We don't know if Daniel Jones is ready for day 1 of training camp. We've seen this happen where the Giants, slow played, and he'll start maybe week 2 or week 3 of training camp. Now we're talking about even more reps for Drew Lock with the first team offense, because he's getting them all throughout March and the spring OTAs, the mandatory mini camp. That's going to be all Drew Lock again, getting all of those reps with Nabers and things like that nature. So it'll be interesting to see from that front. And I'm intrigued where the situation goes. We can talk a little bit about the injury guarantee with Daniel Jones. They haven't addressed it yet, but it's something to seriously consider as you walk into the season. Like, there's only one way for if the Giants aren't a winning team this year, the only way to make it worse is by playing Daniel Jones, have him get his 3rd season-ending injury in 6 years, and now you have to pay another $25 million in guaranteed going into the 2025 season. So they have to consider that, and we'll see what happens with that. But as far as where this leaves Daniel Jones in your mind, Nick, I'll tell you where I'm at with this. I look at this situation for Jones, and I think he has one of, if not the best left tackles in football, who should be fully healthy going into this season. Personally, I think there's a chance he could be the best left tackle in football at any point. He's certainly top 3. That is so underrated to have. I think Malik Nabers is not going to take long to become one of the better receivers in the NFL. Didn't take guys like Jamar Chase long. Didn't take guys like Jalen Waddle long. I have just as high a grade, if not higher grade, on Malik Nabers as I do Jalen Waddle. These types of receivers, they don't take long. So now he has one of the, in my opinion, 10, 15 best receivers in the NFL. Top 2-3 left tackle in the NFL. Jalen Hyatt and Wandell Robinson. Depth with Darius Slayton and Isaiah Hodgins. Potentially Darren Waller, Daniel Bellinger, who I like, who you like. Potentially upgrade across the rest of the offensive line if JMS can take a step, if John Runyon can be what they expect him to be. Who knows about Evan Neal, but you got a Luminor, who we've already seen can handle the job with the Raiders last year. This is a lot. Like, just Andrew Thomas and Nabers alone is a lot. But then you're also talking about a ton of good depth pieces. We saw Hyatt get open on tape. We saw Slayton get open on tape. We saw Wandell get open on tape. We saw Wandell do a lot of good things on tape last year. So for me now, Nick, the bar is set a lot higher for me from what I expect from Daniel Jones. I'm not going to look at this season if we get another 2022 and be like, that's our QB, we move forward with him. No. Those days are over, Nick. The bar needs to be 4,000 passing yards, in my opinion, at worst 3,750. He needs to have over 8 yards per passing attempt, 30 passing touchdowns. And why am I setting this bar so high? Because people could look at that like, oh my God, that you're asking for a lot. 4,000 passing yards and 30 passing TDs. That's like the top 10 quarterback. Why am I asking for this? Because why else would you allocate 18 to 20% of your salary cap in 2025 to this player if he's not going to give you that with Nabers and Thomas and potentially a good solid line around him and 5 deep at receiver and 2 guys we really like in Hyatt and Robinson, and Bellinger, maybe even Waller? No, that you have. If you want to take up 20% of your team's cap in 2025, you better give him 30 passing touchdowns. You better average over 8 yards per pass. You better throw for 4,000 yards, or else what's the point? There is no point. If yes, you are making only 5% of your cap and you're on a rookie deal, great. You can get yourself 22 passing touchdowns or whatever the hell it is and average another 7 yards and, 62% completion rate. But that's the bar I'm setting, Nick, now for keeping him in 2025. And winning games is obviously part of this as well. They have to win football games and they have to compete for the division and be a Super Bowl contender. Otherwise, I just don't understand the point of moving into 2025 if he doesn't take a pay cut and allocating a fifth of your cap there. Where are you on that at on that 30,000 foot view question?
I mean, I think that's obvious at this point. You and I have been talking about this for how long now? You need to see a market improvement from Daniel Jones. Like, I feel like we've had this conversation dating back to the time when Jason Garrett and Joe Judge was his coach.
Well, it's been a long conversation.
Next year, this year, no excuses. And you know what? Just to be, perfectly objective, he's had excuses.
Right.
He's had excuses.
Fair.
But it's fair, but there are a lot of excuses at this point. And I think there's enough tape out there to show that the guy, and I've said this so many times, I don't want to be redundant, but since the conversation's here, he's reluctant to throw the football when the opportunities arise, and the opportunities don't arise often because the windows are so tight in the NFL. And the difference between really good quarterbacks is they anticipate those windows and they attack, and he is reluctant to do so. And you're not going to win football games if you're not a special quarterback or a special type of player, and you also don't anticipate the throws. And Daniel Jones isn't that. He has a modest arm. I think it's an average arm. It's not bad, but it's not great. It's not next level. And he doesn't anticipate. And he has all of these injuries. And he's going to cost like $50 million.
Well, that's the other thing, right?
There's a lot there. Like, I feel like we talk about it a lot. And
I hope they're willing to understand this too. I really do. Because to us, it seems obvious, Nick, but I'm not so sure it seems so obvious to the Giants. I know Rich Eisen has his report. And I felt like going into this thing, I still think that could be the case, right? Like, they probably looked at this like, we have our conviction on May and Williams and we couldn't get them. So whatever, we move forward. So I'm not sold that they're sold on Jones. And I still think it's possible they've moved on in their heads from this. And this is the best they can do. But really, if you're going to look at a guy with this kind of injury history and say, I'm going to allocate 20% of my salary cap to this guy, he better be giving you 4,030, and 8 yards an attempt. Like, it's just like, what the hell is the point? Just get Tyrod or something like that other than that, because you can get that for 9-10 million and get the same kind of production with Nabers and Andrew Thomas and all these guys.
Think about it from their perspective right now. They made a mistake. They paid a lot of money to this guy and he's injured. And you're not just going to say, yeah, we made a mistake. Now you're going to say, we did make the playoffs with him. Let's see if we can do something again with him now that he's under contract, because he has to be here at this point. We can't get rid of him right now. So let's see what we can do. We're not going to throw him under the bus, but of course the Giants are going to look for other options once they can realistically get out from underneath this contract.
Yeah, and that's not to say that's impossible. He could still make this make this team's future, Nick, if he takes this step. And I know we've been discussing since Jason Garrett era, and I give him the benefit of the doubt that we have, but he has had a shit situation. But what I'm saying is this new situation in 2024 does not project as shit, and in a lot of ways can be projected as really good. If this O-line hits like it could, and we've been saying that for years too, but even if the O-line gets to average with Nabers, Hyatt, Wandale, the depth at wide receiver, Dable calling your plays, designing your plays, that's enough. That's more than enough. That's getting really good. And then I need to see some actual passing production, because I'm done with like the grind to 8 or 9 wins, the high EPA that he had in 2022, but no explosive pass rate. Most of your production against shit Minnesota defense and Indianapolis defense, terrible against the good defenses. In Eagles, you have no chance in the division. Like, that's not the ceiling. And for 20% of your cap, it just can't be. So I want to make it clear right now that we need to be clear that this step has to happen and it has to be real. It can't be just similar to 2022, because it's just not what they didn't re-sign him to be 2020. We talked about that too.
What's a real step to get paid almost $50 million in a season? Like, you're talking about just developing into like Patrick Mahomes. Like even if he were to have his best career year, is that worth $50 million next year when you can get away from that contract for a $22 million cap hit and relieve 19 mil in your cap space?
Right.
I think that's just the reality of the situation.
Yeah. to us. And I understand some people have a different thought process on that, and it's okay. But I'm just hoping that they're willing to understand that now it's time to really see that step, and we can't keep going back and forth on, does he have enough? Does he not? And I think, one thing that I wanted to talk to you about as we stick on like the 30,000 foot view stuff, because I've had some other interesting things. People have come at me tonight in my replies on Twitter, so I wanted to get your take on this. And I've now gotten your take that you agree with what Joe Schoen did, which was not take a quarterback he didn't have the conviction on, or trade up or whatever, and take Malik Nabers. I think we're in. But people have said to me, Dan, 6 quarterbacks were taken in the top 12 picks. Are they just all wrong and they reached, and Joe Schoen is just definitely right? And the way I look at it is I'm like, look, again, if you agree there's no real point in spending a top 6 pick at quarterback unless he has a top 5 ceiling, and you can view even recent top 6 picks as Daniel Jones is the best example, the perfect example as to why this is maybe a bad idea, then yeah, the answer is yes, Joe Schoen is right. And further, how few elite quarterbacks are there in the NFL? How many of these guys are going to be bust? Just because the NFL is doing it right now, 6 quarterbacks the first 12 picks, doesn't mean that they're definitely right. And I still think like that's the key here. If we're going to do this thing, Nick, like if we're going to go over this quarterback, make sure he has that ceiling. So what do you think about that whole thing? Like how other teams viewed these quarterbacks as worth a top 12 pick, but the Giants did not?
I view it that every coach and every team is going to value the quarterback position differently. They all run different systems. They all have different meetings. They're all going to mesh differently. And if you don't believe that this player has the ceiling that you're looking for, don't overdraft him when you can bring in a wide receiver who might have a ceiling at another important position, an evasive position. If you're the New York Giants, you've been looking for this position for quite a while now. Bring that guy in, and then you can worry about quarterback later. You brought Drew. Look, I know this is it. Drew Lock is not the long-term solution here, but you brought Drew Lock into this quarterback room to possibly compete and to possibly just see what he has, right? And to push Daniel Jones, if you will. Mm-hmm. Daniel Jones is the starter, but he's coming off the injury. And if it's week 3 and the Giants are 0-3 and Daniel Jones hasn't looked good, we're going to be talking about Drew Lock at that point. So sure. If you don't think JJ McCarthy's the guy, why would you? That's how the Jets, and it's weird because the Jets fell in love with Zach Wilson, but that's how these teams in recent memory go out in the top 10, top 12, and they select these quarterbacks, and it just ends up blowing up in their face when they're not the guy. I'm not saying that's going to happen with Michael Penix and Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy, but if you don't love the guy, why would you make that selection?
Right.
This is your face of your franchise.
It doesn't make sense. And I think there's a lot more desperation at play for a lot of these people.
That's Sean a perfect Payton, word. That's the perfect word right there.
Doesn't mean Sean Payton's like a genius. He saw something. And I saw that Sean Payton had like Bo Nix as QB3. Good for him. He loves the evaluation. I can see it. Bo Nix has had some interesting tape. You sent me that text the other day. You're like, what? Bo Nix has some moments, and you do see it.
It's not terrible.
He's desperate to get his quarterback. His job's on the line. I kind of commend Joe Schoen for not falling into that and maybe John Mara too, for being like, look, your leash is longer than the media says it is right now. You don't have to just force a QB to restart your cycle and buy yourself time, because that's kind of what I feel like some of these dudes are doing, like Sean Payton. Like he's buying himself time here by taking the quarterback, because now he gets 2 years to say, we got to let him develop, right? You got to give me time to develop this quarterback. And that's what Joe Schoen could have said on paper if he had forced a quarterback, or in his mind, forced a quarterback and taking a guy he didn't have graded highly. But as long as the owner is on board with saying, look, it didn't work out this year. You tried to get May, you tried to get Caleb. We just, we won those games and we didn't have the pick to get these guys. These guys weren't willing to trade these guys, which, by the way, Nick, this should really close the door on the whole. Don't worry about your draft pick. You can always trade up for a quarterback. You can sometimes trade up for a quarterback. You can't always trade up for a quarterback. If the team picking ahead of you don't want to trade that pick, you can't trade for the quarterback. And this goes, please, so everybody knows this, for the Arch Manning stuff. Getting a lot of Arch Manning stuff, Nick. Don't even consider Arch Manning, please, because Arch Manning is going number 1 overall in the class that he comes out, in my opinion, and I'm pretty confident about that. I mean, just the traits are through the roof. Watching that Texas spring game was wild, just watching how confident and comfortable he was in the pocket. And guess what? There is no Godfather offer. You can't start trading back now to pick up assets. The team is going to hang the phone up on you immediately. They're not taking 17 first-round picks. They're putting Arch Manning on their roster. Whoever has the number 1 pick gets Arch Manning. There's no trade back. There's no Godfather offer. So unless you think the Giants get the number 1 pick the year he comes out, which is like a very hard thing to do, obviously, as we've seen this year, the Giants had 2 wins. They were in the number 2 slot, and they had their QB1 have a torn ACL, their QB2 on IR. They were down to a QB3 UDFA, and they still didn't get a top 2 pick in the draft. That shows you how hard it is to get the number 1 pick. So I want to make that clear too, Nick. I think you agree on that. The Arch Manning stuff, we can't do that right now. We won't.
We have no idea what's going to happen between now and then.
Yeah,
silly.
Okay, Here's another thing I wanted to talk about with you. I think it's 100% fair for Giants fans to be happy the team didn't reach or force QB. Happy they took best player available, Malik Nabers, got arguably the second best prospect in the class. I think that could be true. But also sad they never had any real shot at Caleb or Drake May, the conviction quarterbacks they had. And that, as Samuel Rivera, one of our followers and listeners, said, Dable, he said it, and he's not wrong about this, Nick. It is a possible scenario if the Giants lose a lot of games this year with the pressure that it comes to being a coach in New York, that it could be a possibility that Dable, who we believe is a QB whisperer, never actually gets the chance to mold a young quarterback. And he says that's now in serious jeopardy. And I think all those things can be they're not mutually exclusive. They can all be true at once.
A quarterback whisperer who never gets a young quarterback to whisper to.
Oh, yeah.
Tragic. It really would be a tragic situation. Yeah. If it's just Tommy Cutlets is the one young quarterback that he gets to an undrafted kid. Yeah, that would be unfortunate.
But it's life in the NFL. Not everyone gets quarterbacks to work with. You don't always have it fall your way. Like it's not like
so. It opens up such a fun conversation too, Dan. Like such an interesting conversation. It's like, what if they didn't, have a successful season in 2022? What if it stuck to like what the expected game plan? How would that have changed
things? Everything would have changed at that point, Nick. What if Dave Gettleman had his conviction and just said screw it in 2020 and drafted Justin Herbert? I mean, you could go back. That's like there's a lot of there's a lot of the what do they call it, the butterfly effect type of stuff that goes down to it. But I know a lot of fans are disappointed. Though there were a lot of fans, like shout out like the Sal Queen type people who are we love him, great show. He's got his own. He's a giant. He's the man. And they're just like I was gonna be disappointed. I needed a quarterback. Tonight was the night we got our new franchise quarterback. I get it. I don't know if I'm ever gonna be on that page, Nick, of just take the quarterback to take the quarterback. Like if I don't see a quarterback within range of me being able to take him that has in my mind elite traits, elite frame, elite athleticism, and projection, I'm just not gonna be that sad if they missed him. It sucks. Like is there really can I sit here today, Nick, and tell our listeners that I have a lot of hope right now for the future of this franchise? Not necessarily, to be honest, because I put a lot of weight on the quarterback position, and I don't know really how the Giants are going to get one, because I don't believe in Daniel Jones. I'll be honest about the situation. But at the same time, I don't think that I think there's also the same, like the other side of that coin, Nick, is that you could be putting yourself in an even worse position long-term if you jam the position and just jam quarterback. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. Again, it all comes down to the conviction of the coach and the general manager. And JJ McCarthy, look, I like JJ McCarthy on tape. I liked him better than I thought I would based on a lot of the pre-draft talk that was going on. But that doesn't mean that I think the Giants should have selected him when you could have a possible Pro Bowl wide receiver on your hand. Because I think there's a higher ceiling with that. Maybe an all-pro. And I had a much higher grade on Nabers than I did JJ, but I know that's kind of like hard to even really understand because like quarterbacks are so heavily weighted in one direction. But JJ, I had some issues with, deep ball accuracy and arm strength and all that kind of stuff. The velocity was really good, I'll tell you that much, but just didn't have a lot of other pitches in his arsenal. He could develop it, and he's in the optimal position to do so, as we mentioned at the top of the show.
In a dome too, baby. I love quarterbacks going to a dome. I mean, he lucked out. To me, if I'm JJ McCarthy, I'm happy with how this whole thing played out.
Oh yeah.
It's as good as it gets. All right, Nick, do you want to talk day 2 targets, or do you want to get to some questions first and then wrap up with day 2 targets maybe?
Yeah, let's do that. Let's get to some of these questions. So
thank you for being patient for those of you who gave questions.
Absolutely. Diego Ortiz, not a question, just said, I missed May. But hey, Nabers is great. I feel like that should be the title of this episode, right? He missed May, but Nabers is great.
I like that. I mean, look, I'm in on that.
Yeah. Well, we'll make that the title, Diego. We'll credit you in the below section, the description section. Victor Perez says Georgia found a new way to F.A. Cousins tonight.
That's good. This is one of the best comments we've ever gotten.
Victor, this
is actually one of my favorite comments we've ever gotten in the history of Big Blue Banter on the live chats. I'm going to have to even repeat it. Georgia found a new way to F a Cousins tonight. I love that. But by the way, did you see that Daniel Jeremiah thing? Like that they didn't tell. Apparently, they didn't tell Cousins they were drafting Penix. That's really freaking weird, man.
That is. Why would you do that?
And I almost got that pick right too. I debated going Penix to Atlanta because I looked at that roster and I was like, they don't really need anything, which is such a weird thing to say. It's not they don't need anything. I don't personally like this defensive class. Like I didn't love this
Yeah,
class. It was kind of eventually had them get my Byron Murphy, which is kind of added riches to what they already have there on the D line. So they didn't really need it. But and then I looked at it, I was like, maybe they do make this move of like drafting to the future. And this is something, by the way, Thomas Dimitroff said on a podcast like 3 days ago. Like, if Atlanta was doing this the right way, they would strongly consider doing the quarterback of the future now. But like, I still find it weird that they wouldn't tell Cousins this. It's like a very odd thing.
I think that's weird. And it's also a little bit weird that like he might not start until he's like 28
He's gonna be like
29
when he starts his first game.
It's gonna be like a Brandon Whedon type of thing.
It's gonna be another. Penix is already like 25 years old. He starts his first game as a Falcon at 28. That would be a wild situation.
Hey man, if you have again goes back to the word conviction. If you have your conviction for your guy, you go get him. It's just the lack of communication. If I'm Kirk Cousins, I'm like, what the hell? Like that's how you're presenting yourself as an organization to me after I'm here now.
Also, like okay,
it's odd.
That's right, and you're committing to Kirk Cousins. You're saying you're our guy, and like you have a lot on your roster, sure, but like guess what? If you give him also Rome Odunze there, so now he's got Kyle Pitts, Drake London, and Rome Odunze. This freaking sweet. And Bijan Robinson, and they have a pretty good O-line too. Like Lindstrom's amazing, and they're okay at the tackle positions. Like I actually think they kind of screwed up. Like if you're gonna do this, like, and I'm not gonna say screwed up. They had a conviction on Penix, and it could end up being like the smart. We say everybody's laughing at them now. It could end up being the smartest thing. We don't know. We just don't know. But like, I feel like you get Kirk Cousins, Romo Dunes here. At the very least, you tell them like what your plan is. Like, don't worry, we got you. But we also just had a conviction on this guy. He's gonna once you move on, he'll be our guy, type of thing. So it was interesting. But thank you, Victor, for a funny comment.
Great comment. David Goodman. Thank you so much, David. He says, I feel hopeless.
I knew this was coming from Goodman.
They are in quarterback hell with no way out in sight.
Yeah, I mean, you're not wrong about that fact. They are in quarterback hell and they don't have a way out of sight, but a lot of teams don't have a way out of sight, and some things could happen. You could like, I don't know, man. Like, I'll be honest with you, Nick. If I'm a Jets fan right now, I'm pretty excited about my 2024 season. Okay, I am. I think the Jets have a legitimate chance to make a run this year. I really do, if they can stay healthy with their veterans, specifically Tyron and obviously Rodgers. But like, maybe the Giants can get themselves in a position where they can build the roster up and then trade for a veteran. I don't know.
You want to know what I want to happen now that this has already happened? Yeah. I want Jared Goff to sign an extension with the Lions.
Oh, the Hendon Hooker trade?
And the Giants trade for Hendon Hooker.
Someone said this to me, Nick, and I love this. I would love that. I mean, you were higher on Hooker than I think anybody. We just love that throwing motion.
And the Hyatt Hooker connection, that's like another little sub story for this.
But like, my question for you, because I have seen people talk to me about this, and I would love it too. If I heard that would be the way to get me excited about this Giants quarterback position again, because I like this tape a lot. Why would the Lions trade him and not just have him as a sweet QB2 for cheap? Like, what's the incentive for them?
The incentive would just be if they love somebody in the draft and they're in this win now window.
It's not a bad take.
Yeah. Is what, like 30, maybe 29, 30 years old.
Sure.
It shouldn't cost that much. Again, they've developed him. He was recovering from the ACL this last year. He's an older prospect, but he has the type of arm strength that I'm looking for, and a much more polished. Yeah. And I know he played in an unconventional offense, but a much more polished prospect than like a Joe Milton, for instance, right?
Yes.
So, and we know the Giants loved him. That's another thing, right? Like the Giants gave Daniel Jones a big contract, and they still hosted, I think, a top 30 visit for Hendon Hooker. Like they really liked Hendon Hooker. So there is a connection there. And if they did click, that's something that at least makes sense if they do love Jared Goff and they want to extend him longer than he's currently under contract.
I love the idea, Nick, and I like that you're thinking outside the box. Anything we can do to try to get us out of the situation we're in now, or at least add hope to the situation we're in now. But I struggle with seeing the perspective from the Lions. Like, if I'm the Lions, I have this guy so cheap under contract, and like I
get that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's tough. But I like the point you made. Like, if we're sitting at, it would have to be like 70. It's not going to be later than that. We're not going to get him for a day 3 pick. But if they're sitting at 70, and the Lions are like, actually, there's like somebody who fell really far, and he's like the 40th best player on our board, and he's like a position we really need, and he can help us win. We're in our Super Bowl window. They might be willing to entertain going to 70 just to try to win the. I don't think it's impossible. I thought that was a good point by you. We'll see what happens there. And it's definitely interesting, though.
Rene Ruiz says, and thank you, Giants desperately need to start scoring points. Nabers is a great start. Personally hoping for offensive player only draft in days 2 and 3 cheers. It's a possibility, right? I think they're going to go defense, especially with some of these defensive players on the board. Braden Fisk, Kool-Aid McKinstry. I mean, Cooper DeJean's on the board. I don't think he'll be there too long. Johnny Newton's on the board. Don't think he'll be there too long.
No.
But I do like a lot of I would like to bolster this offense because when was this offense ever good?
Like
2022,
2011, it was really good.
Yes, in 2022, that was not a good offense. No, I know, but they were very efficient, and that's what they relied on: play action, efficiency, big runs by Saquon Barkley, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, now, and they still, I think, were in the bottom tier of like points per game type stuff and things like that.
Yes, I think they need a lot of work on defense though too. And I think there's going to be defensive players at 47 and 70 who I'm going to look at and be like, I would not mind seeing Max Melton as a New York Giant.
Yeah.
I would not mind seeing Braden Fisk as a New York Giant.
Yeah.
You know?
I completely agree with you. I think it's more likely they're going defense on day 2. I'm sorry, with round 2. As far as the round 3, that's more open-ended to BPA and things like that. But there's going to be a lot of best players available on their board on defense coming up. And remember, like, they're still very light in the secondary of the Giants, like very light at corner and safety. They're
concerningly light
at those positions. So it's not just like you can just fire off on offense. I would open to like a Cooper Beebe if they loved him and they said, you know what, we love him, we'll take him at 47. Like people think that's a reach, but they don't. And his film is pretty fucking sweet, and he has a good athletic profile. Like they want to do that, or Christian Haynes or whatever, fine. Like I'm open to that, Nick. And I really wanted Tyler Guyton. I thought he was falling, but as a developmental guy, but the Cowboys are just not going to let that happen, and they took him. But, by the way, I'll just tell you this. If Joe Schoen wants to get aggressive with all the picks that he saved from not having traded for a quarterback and wants to trade it for Cooper DeJean, count me in, because I love Cooper DeJean in this class, and I think I love the idea of him and Shane Bowen's defense specifically, playing off coverage in that defense, wherever the hell you want to put him. So just something to consider. But you're right, like, him and Newton are probably going picks like 34, 35, and they're all the way up at 47.
Yeah, and Kool-Aid is another one. Kool-Aid McKinstry is another one I'm very open to, the Alabama defensive back. And then our last one, Frank Corona Jr. says, and thank you, I'm sorry, I know you guys are excited. I like Nabers too, but I can't do another year where they start 2-6 and we are rooting 4 draft positions again, which if you look at Vegas odds, that's what is expected.
I just think, I understand it, Frank, but I think that's just like we have to accept this as a potential reality, and we have to temper our expectations maybe. But I will say this, like adding Brian Burns is going to help the defense in my opinion. And I think we could have a defense that works from the standpoint of rush 4, drop 7 most of the time. And that with that front 4, it might work. They might be even more effective than they were last year. And they were pretty effective with Wink last year. And then offensively, Nabers will help them win games. I do think he will start to help them win games. And, outside of that, hopefully the offensive line will not get as injured and will help them win games as well and just be better all around. I don't necessarily think a 2-6 start is a guarantee next year. Obviously, though, if you don't get the quarterback in this draft, which they didn't in round 1, you can't expect it's a different it is a different outlook. Let's be fair about the situation. Quarterback changes everything in this sport. It's a different outlook. It's just like saying in the NBA, if you get your star versus not getting your star, there's a little bit of a ceiling drop. But again, Frank, I don't know, Nick, I don't really have too much to like talk him off the ledge when it comes to that stuff. I'm going to be honest about the situation.
No, I think we should be on the ledge to some point, because this has been a reality for the New York Giants for quite a while. We start a lot of seasons 2-6, and we're sitting there like, we're going to suck. And then we go on a winning streak. Tommy Cutlets comes in and wins 3 in a row. And we're like, now we don't get Drake May. So like, those are the realities that we deal with. But man, things can happen. I do trust this coaching staff. I do trust this front office. I think the Giants have done everything to put their offense into a position to at least be better than last year, despite losing Saquon Barkley, not spending up on a running back, which I also liked. So you added Nabers. Mm-hmm. I don't really love their quarterback situation, but if the Patriots weren't willing to trade, what are you going to do in that?
Right.
What are you going to do? Right. So it's the reality that we face, that they're winning those games at the end of the season.
They did have Spencer Rattler in for private visits. I wonder if there is any interest there.
I think there is probably, man.
Yeah.
I mean, they had him in for a private visit. You're not wasting those private visits.
Right.
And he's, to me right now, if I'm not mistaken, I would say my highest ranked quarterback, I think.
Yeah, he's my highest ranked quarterback for sure. That's like, I mean, 6 went on day one, which is
That's
crazy.
crazy. 6 went in the first 12 picks.
I know that is just that was wild. There was very rumored. So like there's rumors leading up to the draft, Nick, that would happen. But like I've seen that rumor so many times. Kyle Ouellette is a first round pick. Jacob Eason's a first round pick. Like you just see it so much through the years, and then it ends up being these guys fall to day 3, and you're like, all right, enough of this shit. Like I don't believe by it. And then it actually happened. The NFL went nuts. Like I can't believe Bo Nix went to the Broncos, but I get it. But like with where Sean Payton's at, but like some of these are just didn't expect to happen. Penix and Nix, I don't think we could have ever seen that happening in the first 12 picks.
Nix was one that there was a lot of people saying that Sean Payton loved him, and I guess they were right. Penix was one that was very surprised, especially to Atlanta. Everyone was pegging Atlanta as the team that was going to pick a defensive player, and it took to pick 15, the Colts, to get a defensive player when Leate Latu went off the board. It was a very odd draft. Very odd draft.
It was an odd draft for sure. Do you have a day 2 a round 2 wish list? I have mine handy. Do you have one, or do you want me to talk through mine?
I can just go off the top of my head, but yeah, let's talk through yours.
So, and we can go off the top of your head and then get guys in that I miss, because I'm sure I'm going to miss some. I break it down by tiers. My tier 1, obviously this would probably require a trade up. Cooper DeJean, number 1, defensive back out of Iowa. Johnny Newton, the defensive lineman out of Illinois. Those are my clear tier 1s
he's
left.
A stud, man.
Yes. I don't know why. I think both should have been first round picks. My tier 2 is Braden Fisk, the interior defensive lineman out of Florida State. Chris Jenkins, an interior defensive lineman in Michigan that I personally love. And then Javon Bullard, the defensive back, I call him, because I think he's going to be best as a slot personally, out of Georgia. Tier 3 for me is Mike Sanderstall, corner I just loved in this class and think is a great fit for this system. Former wide receiver out of Michigan. And then Max Melton. Then I go to all the way to tier with Jaden Hicks, Christian Haynes, who I didn't like as much as other people did, but I like Cooper Beebe, Dominic Pooney, Peyton Wilson, and Kamari Lassiter. That's where I'm at right now with as far as round 2 goes. So my targets are mostly interior defensive linemen, defensive backs, and interior offensive linemen. Actually, I think they all are that actually.
So I didn't break it down to tiers. I might do that actually in a little bit to put it up on Big Blue View. But Cooper DeJean and Johnny Newton are the top 2 guys. I think that's what ESPN has also as the top 2 guys. And I think Kool-Aid McKinstry would be my third guy. And possibly,
I totally missed him. I totally forgot. Wow.
Yeah. But Braden Fisk is really close with that. And I'm going to take the wide receivers, obviously, out of consideration here. But Ladd McConkey's still around, right? I like Edgerrin Cooper. Giants, excuse me, are not going to go a linebacker, though. I can be talked into TJ Tampa. I wish Kamari Lassiter was a little bit of a better athlete, a little bit hesitant with his athleticism. That's the Georgia cornerback. TJ Tampa is the Iowa State cornerback. I think he's even a little bit more athletic than Kamari Lassiter and a much bigger type of presence as well. And Max Melton, I mean, 47 is a little early for him. I don't know if he'd be there at 70. And I do think he fits what Shane Bowen wants to do. I also really like Cole Bishop a lot, the safety. That's more of a pick 70 type of player. And for offensive line, that's where it gets interesting because obviously Cooper Beebe was one of my guys. I like Christian Haynes. Could be talked into both of those guys. But offensive tackle, Blake Fisher is probably, and Roger Rosengarten. Those are the 2 players
that got more at 70 though.
Same. And then if I just look at the offensive guards, I already named the 2 guys that really interest me. You know what? Zach Zinter is more of a 4th round guy.
Yes.
Or maybe a pick 70 guy that I could be talking to. Had injury issues at Michigan, but his tape, he's just tough type of individual who just embodies Michigan football. I think I think he's a better version of what Ben Bredesen was, to be lazy and just helmet scout.
That though. Yeah.
But they were similar players.
I know exactly what you mean though.
Yeah. And people are like, Ben Bredesen sucks. I don't think he sucks, but
he's a better version of that.
I think he's a better version of that, of course. So if I had to name 5, though, it would be DeJean, Johnny Newton, Kool-Aid, Braden Fisk, and then my 5th guy might be TJ Tampa, maybe Max Melton. Actually, Max Melton I have higher than TJ, so Max Melton.
I'm not as high on TJ Tampa, I think, as other people are. I see the physical traits there. When I watched him, it's not the player that we'll see what happens there because I didn't watch a lot of him. Maybe it's me doing a poor job of helmet scouting here, even myself. Just I get scared of taking corners from that conference, and I just haven't seen many work in the NFL. I felt very good about Sanderstall and Melton. I would rather gamble on those 2.
I forgot to mention Sanderstall, and then Newbin's around too. If the Giants do want to go,
Newbin's a guy you liked early in the process. I know you didn't mention him eventually in your My Guys episode. I thought you might have in that episode, but I know you.
I didn't watch enough of him. See, I didn't do an evaluation of Newbin. I watched a lot of Newbin just through watching Big Ten football, and I saw his range. And so from
they
that,
some
I
safeties
really,
too.
yeah,
Minnesota.
Antoine Winfield, that's your guy.
Do you like Bullard? What's your thoughts on Bullard out of Georgia?
I do like Bullard. I think he's kind of like a do-it-all type of individual. He's a little bit undersized, though. Yeah. I think in this defense, he can slide in and he could play big nickel, if you want to call him that. But he's kind of built like a slot receiver, right? Has some like these frustrating decisions coming down into the alley where you're just like, that was like a missed tackle and it just take a poor angle. But overall, I think he has range. And from what I understand about that defense, they put a lot on his plate and he was able to handle a lot of that. And he was revered on a defense just full of alphas. We know how many defensive players have been drafted out of Georgia. So from that standpoint, 70, I would be, I think, a little bit more interested in it. I think I'm more interested in a safety at 70, but I don't know who's going to be around at that point. We have no idea.
Yeah.
We didn't think Johnny Newton and Cooper DeJean would fall out of the first, or AD Mitchell would fall out of the first round.
AD Mitchell, character. There's some weird stuff.
Well, like he has the diabetes and all that kind of stuff. I'm not 100% certain what's going on. Braden Fisk.
I heard before the draft that he was going to fall. AD Mitchell, he's going to be one of those guys that falls because of this off-field stuff.
And then Braden Fisk, we thought he might fall. We thought he might be a surprise first-round pick, but then you're like, yo, what 24, almost 25-year-old with 31-inch arms at the defensive line
ever goes round one?
The athletic ability is just enticing, and if he's there, I'd take him at 47 too. I think, dude, the way Florida State ran their defense, it's exactly what, from a front standpoint, it's exactly what Shane Bowen is going to do. And I just think him and Dex next to each other, it would work really well, especially with Burns.
I like to hear that, Nick, and I also like the idea of if they go D-line at 47, just being like, you know what, we're now a defense that wins with our front, and we're not going to worry that much about the secondary. We do have Banks, we like that, but we're just going to win with the front. We're going to make it so the front decides everything, and I've seen NFL defenses do that. It's not uncommon. It's not impossible to do. And
it's a different. It's a different defense, obviously, with Shane Bowen, but I think Joe Schoen is 2 for 2 taking No, he's not, because Bobby McCain wasn't a hit, but he got Fabian Moreau and Nick McLeod. Those were both hits that he just picked up off the street. Bobby McCain didn't work out, though. Now, you could say, he's more of a safety, but he's hit on these veteran free agents, and they came in and they play competently enough to not kill your defense.
Yeah, it helps to have Jerome Henderson as your D-back coach. You can get away with maybe not having the top-tier elite talent at the corner position and the safety position as well. When you go into that, it'll be interesting to see how the Giants do that, because I believe that I would prefer, probably if push came to shove and I had even grade, the IDL these days. And this is such a change from what I used to be, Nick, when I was like, Gettleman's taking so many IDLs. I can't believe it. Because now I'm just like, I kind of just want everything to start and end at the line of scrimmage. Like, just own your both sides of your line of scrimmage like the Eagles and Cowboys have done for so many years. And you're giving yourself such a chance to win.
And you gotta realize too, man, I know you understand this. Drafting defensive linemen, investing in your defensive line allows you to do different things on the back end. If you have a really stout defensive lineman, you don't need to rotate a player down into the box. You can play a lot more too high, which mitigates explosive plays. So you don't have to put that safety in the box. That's why I think Dexter Lawrence was just a home run pick in 2019. Like, just an insanely good pick by Dave
Gettleman did that for us. Thomas and Dexter, he did two great, amazing things for us. Thank God.
All right, I want to ask you one question before we get out of here. We got two supers, so I'm going to hit the supers first. Joe Winograd, thank you so much, says, hey guys, just tuning in. How do you feel about not taking a quarterback? We already discussed this, but we'll briefly go over it. We wanted Drake May. The Patriots didn't want to give up the chance to select Drake May, so they didn't. And we didn't want Brian Daboll or Joe Schoen to force a quarterback for the sake of forcing a quarterback. So we appreciate the pick of Malik Nabers, because I wouldn't want to select somebody that you're not fully in love with or have the conviction about.
And one final silver lining is it keeps the Giants in the quarterback market for 2025 and 2026. They wouldn't be in that market if they if just to take a quarterback took one of these guys that doesn't have a high ceiling in their mind.
JD, thank you so much for the donation. Says Neighbors LFG, which means let's effing go. Would love to see a cornerback in round 2. Melton, Lassiter, Tampa, Sam Prager, Christian Mahogany. Round 4, safety, Mustafa, Bullock, Braid, BPA.
Yeah, I mean, thank you, JD, for the donation. I think it's a pretty solid outline. I don't know which direction the Giants will go, but all those players are players mostly that we've mentioned here. Mustafa is a player I didn't get to watch, but somebody who I really like, who might join the show at some point with us. He's that franchise guy. Yeah. I did a conversation with him because I want to get him on the show. I like him. He breaks down tape. He loves Mustafa. He had him as safety 1 in this class. And I watched some of the stuff, like the film. This dude is a beast tackler. Like, this dude just comes downhill, form tackles, and just fucking rocks these players. And that's just like a presence I want on my defense. Like, so I'm in. If Mustafa falls to round 4, count me in on that.
Yeah, Mustafa's a good player. Let's okay, I wanted to ask you one question before we got out of here.
Sure.
And the question is, what is your ideal day 2?
Okay. Great question.
Let's not get too crazy. Like, Cooper DeJean falls at 47. But like,
no, I'll trade. Honestly, I know this is a little aggressive and we could use the picks, but I have been on record saying I kind of find picks overrated. They look great on paper, but a lot of them end up busting. I mean, what are we doing with Cordell Flott and Josh Azudu right now? And where do we feel about their future? And if you look at the Giants' 3rd round pick history, from Gettleman to Shane to Jerry Reese, there's just very few hits. So my ideal day 3, Nick, I'll give 70. I'll give 47. I'll move up. Maybe I don't even have to, by the way. Maybe if he falls like 6 picks, I can give up like my 4th round pick and 47, and I move up and I get Cooper DeJean. I think Cooper DeJean is such a cookie cutter perfect fit for this style of defense, and I think he could be just such a good. When I watched him, I looked at him versus the rest of this class, and I'm like, this is one of the. To me, this is like, I don't like this defensive prospect class. I've said that before. I don't see many potential playmakers personally in this class. Latu, like some of these edges, I guess, but like. The corners, the 2 big corners, maybe. I didn't really find it either to be the biggest playmaker, except for the guy the Eagles got. I think he could be a playmaker. Terry and Arnold I like, but I didn't see playmaker as much. Cooper DeJean struck me as like maybe one of the 5 to 10 playmaker type defensive prospects in this class. Like, he can make plays on the football. And so that's probably my ideal day 2. I'll trade up for Cooper DeJean. I'll take that. What's yours?
Okay, I'll give you that in a second, but you brought up the 3rd round history.
Yeah.
And I want to consider I want to consider
Why
Lorenzo
not?
Carter a hit, because I think he was really coming along, and then he tore his Achilles, and that really just stifled his career with the New York Giants. And I've always believed in his talent, but that could just be my bias. The New York Giants haven't hit on a 3rd round pick, if you don't consider Lorenzo Carter, taking out Joe Schoen's drafts, since Manningham.
I knew it was since Manningham. Nuts. That's how bad it was. I guarantee you, it seems nuts to us, dude, but I guarantee you, if you looked across the NFL, you'd see this for almost every team. There's going to be 4, 5, 6 teams that are outliers. But, as fans, we just tend to overrate draft picks. I'm going to be honest. They look great on paper. Oh, my God, we traded back. We get all this stuff. And then it's just like, it's hard to hit in the NFL. The draft is a crapshoot for a reason.
Before that would be Tuck.
Well, that's an amazing
Tuck
hit.
Was a huge hit. And then before that, would you say Will Peterson was a hit in 2001 draft?
Kind of.
Western Illinois, man. I remember Will Allen and Will Peterson. We just drafted.
I remember the Will Allen and Peterson. Yeah, he's kind of a hit. Kind of a hit. More so than some of the ones we've had recently.
Yeah. What about Dan Campbell? How about that?
Dan Campbell. Wow.
3rd round pick, 1999.
We're digging real deep there.
Speaking of Dan Campbell, Terry and Arnold was like, if
fit.
You could just perfectly fit a prospect in this draft class to the Detroit Lions.
Glenn.
Oh my God, dude. Like, Tyrion Arnold, watching him play, he is Dan Campbell's guy. I don't know how Dan Campbell always just finds a way to get guys who eat kneecaps, who digest and shit out kneecaps.
I think he probably tries to do this thing. Like, this is what he wants.
Sure.
I also am kind of pissed at how, this is the last thought, but like, I feel like the Eagles and Cowboys did good tonight, and that just annoys me. The Eagles getting Mitchell there was very annoying to me. Like, just keeps sitting, and it's like, both of these teams are just, first of all, Cowboys trading back and still getting Guyton. I love that too. By then, they're picking up picks. Both of them benefiting from the fact that 6 quarterbacks are just flaming off the board before them. That never happens. So that's a little annoying.
Okay. I'll quickly get to my 2. Okay.
Yeah. I want to hear your ideal.
So I don't know. Kool-Aid McKinstry last in 47. I think that's
I love that.
I don't think that's going to happen. So I'm going to take that off.
Okay.
And I'm going to say Braden Fisk.
Is that impossible? I would
so.
love to look at the board.
He's
I would love to.
He's too good, man.
Let me get a board up here. I agree with that. Let me get a board up here.
Good.
We're going to do this real quick. We're going to do a fun, quick final experiment here just because who cares? Everybody's going to enjoy this type of thing. Let's look at these teams. Bills are the first team picking. Do you think the Bills will take Kool-Aid? I'm going to do a quick no on that one.
I don't think so. I think
they recently took a corner. Else. Patriots are next. I'm almost positive that's going to be something for Drake May. Most likely a wide receiver. I'm going to go no there. Cardinals. Would they maybe take a corner? Maybe, right?
I think so. Yeah. I don't even know who.
Now, Cardinals are a maybe. I think they're a maybe. I don't think they have great corners. They do have some decent. Washington Commanders then after that. Definitely in my mind not taking a corner after going it last year and getting their quarterback. Chargers are next. I feel like that's going to be a wide receiver too. It kind of has to be. Titans after that. The Titans could take a corner. I'm going to say that's a possibility. Then it's the Panthers again.
Speaking of the Titans, when they selected J.C. Latham, I was just like, oh, you're 1 year too late. I would have loved to watch J.C. Latham and Derrick Henry together.
I know. But you know what? I don't. Latham was an interesting prospect to me. Like when I watched him, I felt like there was such a wide range of what people thought about him. But and I didn't know where I stood at the end, but I'll say this. Now that he's going to Bill Callahan, I just think he's going to be a hit. I'm going to put I trust Bill Callahan so much as an offensive line coach that I'm just throwing out any thoughts I may have as a prospect or anything I've read or anything. Just I'll trust Bill Callahan. That's going to be a good pick for them. He knows what he's looking at. He knows he can get the most out of him. But anyway, then it goes to Commanders again. This annoys me even to see that the Commanders have two picks in the top 40 tomorrow. It's very annoying. Panthers and Commanders. Packers, maybe. I mean, there are some teams here, and then the Giants are coming up soon, like the Saints, the Raiders. Falcons aren't going to do it. The Colts, maybe. Like, there's not that many corner needy teams there. I think it's a little. I'm going to say you can do this. I'm going to give you this, Nick. I'm going to let you take him there at 47, as you're saying your ideal thing. Okay, so you get that.
Okay, if it's my ideal thing, then I'm going to go, and I love Max Melton, but I think I'm going to take Kool-Aid McKinstry.
Yeah.
At 47, just saying that he slips. And then after that, look, Braden Fisk hasn't fallen to the third round, right?
Not 70, no.
Nah, I can't say that he's fallen to 70.
I'll let you get Cooper if you want him, because I think that's fair.
Cooper,
maybe if you want him.
Then let's go with Cooper Beebe. I think I got him at like 9. I got him at like 92. I think
70 is fair. Interior offensive lines sometimes tend to fall. Like, I don't think that's unfair. I think if that's, but is that what would be ideal for you? Kool-Aid and then Cooper at 70?
I think so, but I'm also tempted to say like a Cole Bishop or maybe even a Tyler Newbin at 70 because Newbin might be
secondary
around
on day 2.
Yeah, just bang. Get the secondary pieces in there. And I think that might be because I like Kool-Aid better than Braden Fisk. And I think Kool-Aid he's a young, like 5-star, great eyes, just a very smart individual. And that's what and he has the man coverage, and he's the most disciplined press corner I watched in this draft class. You don't shake him off his spot. He doesn't get slid off his spot. His eyes are dialed into the wide receiver's chest, and he waits until that wide receiver declares, and then he moves, and then he reacts, and he's fluid enough, and he has the acceleration, and he has the range, and he can play man coverage. He's really smart in zone coverage. So that would be, I think, my ideal pick at 47. I don't think there's a shot he would even be there, though. And I think the Giants were interested too.
I think I'm saying there is a shot because looking at those teams that I just went over, I'm saying no shot for Cooper DeJean or Newton. Those are unfair to ask for at 47. But I think Kool-Aid, just based on how many teams need receivers, dude, and O-line, like Washington's taking an O. Like some of these teams are definitely taking an O-line with those picks. So like I think it's possible. I don't think it's definite, but I think it's possible. I'll say this. Oh, sorry. You want to say something? Then I'll say my thing.
No, I was just going to, there are a decent amount of corners that I do like, though. That makes me be like, if they miss out on Kool-Aid, like Max Melton, Sanders Straw, Cam Hart from Notre Dame, somebody we haven't talked too much about. Chris Abrams Drain for maybe a little bit of a later pick is somebody that interests me as well. So there are a decent amount of day 2 quarterbacks on the board. I think the Giants more than likely are going to come away with one of them.
I'll say this as my ideal wish list if they're not going to trade up for Cooper DeJean, which I said was my number 1 thing, and that seems unlikely anyway. It's just kind of a fun thing. I would like Nick to come out of day 2 with a trench player. I'm going to say that. I'm not going to be, it's not that I'm going to be unhappy, but I think it's risky to go back-to-back D-back on day. The way that D-backs tend to not really have too many high hit rates on day 2 for me. I want to get a trench player with one of these picks. It could be a defensive interior guy or an offensive interior guy, but I want a trench guy with one of the 2 picks personally.
And I know I've said this on past shows, but I want to reiterate it because I think it's important. Joe Schoen puts such a high priority on the defensive line. He did that when he was with Brandon Beane in Buffalo. And last year, he brought in Ashawn Robinson. He brought in Raheem Nunez-Roches. He drafted Jordan Riley. Like he invests into the defensive line, and the Giants are going to be bringing a lot of 4-man pressures. So I would not be shocked at all if 47's an interior defensive line.
So we're ending it on this then. I want to end it on this. 47, we gave our wish list. What's the most likely thing you think is going to happen at 47? You don't have to give a specific player if you don't want, just the most likely thing.
It really depends on who falls. I think the most likely would probably be cornerback, but slightly edging out interior defensive lineman and offensive.
I think it's IDL. My pick is IDL, then corner, but I think IDL I think he's going to do it. He's just reminded me of like those Brandon Bean days when they're just firing off picks on like the kid out of Miami, Rousseau, and then another one on Boogie Basham. And they're just like ripping off D linemen. Like he believes in the trenches. And I could be
Mason Smith out of LSU. Yeah. Mason Smith. And I've watched Mason Smith. I wouldn't love Mason Smith at 47 personally. I get it. He's gigantic. He's 6'5", 105 pounds, huge, long wingspan, all long arms, 5-star recruit, great rookie or freshman season. And then he tore his ACL and he came back last year. I wouldn't love that personally from the tape I saw from 2023, but maybe with a year with Andre Patterson, it can develop it and he can reach a ceiling. I think he has a high ceiling, but that's like a size pick. And I just know they love size and knockback.
True.
They love those two things. And he has those things.
That would almost feel to me like another, like a Zudu Flott type thing where you're just kind of, these are your guys and you're taking them a little early. Like I wouldn't be happy with that pick, but just
70.
Not to say I'm right, but
no, of course, neither am I. Right? Like 70, I would. That's worth.
Oh yeah. Then I'm interested. Yeah. Now you're doing a Planet Theory guy at 70. It's 70 pick is not worth as much as 47. The opportunity cost is less. One guy I like as a realistic target. I'm just going to throw him out because I hooked him out of my guys. I got a good feeling about Chris Jenkins Jr. and I would like to get him. LL Cool John says great content like always. Thank you, LL Cool John. Let's wrap it up there though, Nick. We covered a lot here. It was an hour and a half show. I think final thoughts for me would just be, I'm happy with tonight. I am, because I'm not as happy as I could be. I convinced myself.
There's a spectrum to happiness.
Yeah, there's a spectrum of happiness. The happiest I was going to be is if Drake May was on the Giants after tonight. And I made a mistake of convincing myself of that. I had some sources. I had some people. There's other things going on. It really felt likely at one point. And I convinced myself that if the Patriots really wanted May, we would have known about it already, just like we knew about it with Jaden and to the Washington. But you know what? The Patriots are the type of team that's keeping it close guarded. They, for some reason, I don't know why, they didn't really need to. They loved May, but they didn't want to tell anyone. I just don't know what the value to that is. But I think the point was they did feel, I guess, like if they were blown away by an offer. I don't even think they would have traded it, though, even if they were blown away by an offer. I think based on what I heard from the GM after and just based on what I heard from the rumor of what the Vikings offered, they weren't trading May no matter what. So Michael Will says, Dan, how are you wearing a tennis shirt? Where's the Giants gear? Yes, good question. Nick has a nice Giant shirt on. I don't wear Giant shirts.
I've never broken this off. I've never broken this out yet. Yeah, this is my first time breaking it out.
I like that shirt, by the way. It's nice. I don't wear a Giant shirt on every podcast. I should maybe wear some more Giant shirts. I have a U.S. Open 2023 shirt on here, but
Dan's a good tennis player, by the way. Everybody, I know he's going to be humble about this, but he's a good tennis player. Like I've hit it with him,
I used to be good. I'm not as good anymore.
I've never really played tennis before in my life, but like I went out there and like hit it with them, and I could just like pick up a sport and be like, oh, let me just like try to have fun with it. Dan's pretty good.
No, thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. I won back in the day. I was good. I was first singles in high school. I was 21-7 my senior year. That was the peak of my tennis. But you lose tennis fast. Like it's just like you go out there now. I haven't played all season yet. The first time I play, I'm hitting balls off. Like I'm missing. Like it's such a timing-based sport. But I hope I play more this summer, Nick. I played only like 4 times last summer because you know why? The addiction to golf is real. No, I'm not a good golfer. Thank you, Banks. First of all, Steve Banks Hall, one of my good friends, somebody you know him, Nick.
That's Steve?
Yeah, that's Steve Hall right there, Banks H. Yeah.
Is he the one?
I am not a good golfer.
Trades all the time in the Dynasty League, or no?
He's the one who. Repeat what you said, please, so he can hear that.
Yeah, I said, is he the one that offers all the dumbass trades all the time, then gets pissed when you deny him?
I can't wait to show it to the entire league. Kevin's going to see that. Everyone's going to see that. My guy is just I'm going to share a quick fun story about Steve Hall since he's listening. He once sent me a DM or something where he offered so many trades that somebody sent him back a DM in one of his dynasty leagues. He's like, I'm done with the league. I'm quitting the league. You've just worn me out with all these trade offers you made. It so I find like you've worn me out. He like literally barreled someone down to the point where I had to quit a dynasty league because he offered him too many trades. Incredible stuff. But you know what? It works. He gets trades done. It's annoying to us, but like some people are going to give into these trades, and I've seen him make a lot of trades. So I got to give him credit for it. He's active and he gets them done somehow.
I will take somebody who is active in a league offering
True,
trades over somebody who doesn't like do anything. And you offer them like a fair trade. They don't even look at it, just expires. Yeah. I'll take a Steve over some of the people I play fantasy football with any day.
It's totally fair. Unfortunately, I'm not good at golf yet. And I did see a recent hater come back in the YouTube comments who was like, I haven't watched in a while, but I see Dan still bragging about his golf game. I'm like, when have I ever bragged about my golf game on the show? I've been pretty clear that I'm not good. I'm addicted to it, but I'm not good. And by the way, one final thing I have to address, I'm not pumping up my biceps. When I do this, I'm not showing off my biceps. This is what this guy says. I'm literally going to go to the new window here. You see, I go to a different window in a different tab. That's how it works. I'm picking up references. I don't know why I'm addressing the haters, Nick. This is one of my biggest things I should never do, but yeah, we'll end it at. Anything else we got? What was that Howie Roseman thing I just saw?
Oh yeah, Joe Winograd. Steve's gonna love this. He says he's the Howie Roseman of fantasy football.
Don't give Steve Hall that much credit and build this ego up. I don't need him seeing that you just called him the Howie Roseman of fantasy football. He's not the Howie Roseman of fantasy football. Okay, though he did have an amazing. You know what happened to him last year in our league? He went into the championship game tied. He had Justin Jefferson, and the other person only had Jaden Reed left. Do you remember that game? Vikings Packers Sunday Night Football. Jaden Reed had 30 points, and Jefferson had 8.
Yeah,
insane.
It's devastating, man.
It's devastating. It really is. Like, you're done at that point. You're like, I won the league. I have Jefferson against Jaden Reed. I can't.
I would never. No, I would never say I won the league.
You would never think that. I know that, but I would. Maybe.
They could have the third string running back, and I could have Justin Jefferson. I'd be like, nah, it's not over.
I can't win. There's no way.
It's not over till it's over, baby.
True. All right. We're going to end it on that note. Thanks for everybody tuning in. Please subscribe, hit like. Obviously, you know the draft weekend thing by now, but if you don't and you're new to the show, we're going to have another one of these tomorrow night after the draft concludes. We'll do the same thing. Then Saturday, the same thing after Saturday. And then we'll have at some point on Sunday, probably Sunday night, like a show with like 30,000 foot view, final thoughts, that type of thing. And then after that, we'll get into some undrafted free agents the week after, and then film breakdowns of the guys the Giants have. It'll be fun to do some more Neighbors stuff from that standpoint, see what we can do as far as YouTube goes in that sense. But just keep it locked and loaded. More stuff coming. And as we do every year after the draft, a lot of post-draft interviews. We're planning to get some guys on. I know Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports, somebody that I told him, we tried to get him on, Nick, this past week, but I told him, let's hold till after the draft. I kind of want to get some of these guys to interview after the draft to see what their thoughts on once the picks are actually made instead of like the pre-draft stuff. So I think that'll work out nice.
And he does an excellent job with Rick Spielman, the former general manager of the Vikings. And I just love how Rick will shit all over Ryan like the entire.
I know, they have a fun rapport.
They have a great rapport.
They do. All right, that's it. Thanks to everybody again. Have a great rest of your night, and we'll talk to you soon.